Hello, everybody. Hope you're having a fantastic day. My name is Kmart, and I want to talk about some basketball. And folks, Chris Paul is on the move. He was traded earlier this week to the Washington Wizards. All the experts, the analysts, the insiders basically told us that the Wizards would be looking to reroute him somewhere else. And now we do, in fact, get that trade. And not really one of the teams that I was expecting to see in on Chris Paul because he is going to be going to the Golden State Warriors here. He is headed to the Bay for a rather interesting package coming back from the Warriors. So we'll dive right into what the trade entails. The Warriors get Chris Paul from this trade. Meanwhile, the Washington Wizards receive Jordan Poole, a 2030 first round pick that has unspecified protections on it at the moment, a 2027 second round pick, and Ryan Rollins, who is, I think, like a second year player. The Warriors drafted him last year. They're kind of throwing him in um, for matching and things like that, but he is included as well. So the Warriors get Chris Paul, the Wizards get Poole, a couple of picks, and a bench guy, a developing player, effectively. So, taking a look at the trade in terms of maybe a little bit deeper from the Warriors' perspective, first and foremost, you get Chris Paul, which I know with all the talk about him being sort of moved around and traded repeatedly, I think this is now his sixth team that he's going to play for in his career. There might be some people who are a little bit down on Chris Paul, but honestly, for the Warriors, this feels pretty good, right? They obviously need him to be healthy. That is sort of number one here because he has ended up missing games down the stretch. But if he is healthy, he can still be a pretty massive asset here for this Warriors squad. Potentially give them some help, maybe lead the second unit, play off the bench because I don't really know if he slots into the starting lineup. Steph and Clay kind of seem to have the two guard positions on lock for the Warriors, and I don't really think you want to mess with that. But come off the bench, lead the second unit, as I said, get some valuable minutes of rest for people like Steph and Clay, and help the Warriors out that way. Chris Paul is still a guy who has averaged 9.5 assists per game over the course of his career. He's never had a season, I believe, where he hasn't averaged double digit points as well. So he's still capable of going out there and finding some shots if needed. And obviously, when you're averaging close to 10 assists per game for your entire career, you are someone who knows how to run an offense and how to find opportunities for teammates, which is something that the Warriors could definitely use outside of just their starting five, right? The bench production could very much afford to get a little bump, and I think Chris Paul will help that. Also, just having that veteran presence in the lineup. I know the Warriors have plenty of it already, especially all the talk sort of last year or the last couple of years about Andre Iguodala still being around, even though he wasn't playing crazy amounts of time. They've got a lot of guys there to teach younger players, and Chris Paul would only add to that. So acquiring Chris Paul, not a bad play from the Warriors. They also get out of the Jordan Poole situation that they had sort of caused themselves. Um, Obviously there was the drama between himself and Draymond Green with the fight, the punches thrown in that practice early last season. But even outside of that, Jordan Poole was a player who certainly had potential, still has potential, and is talented, but it always felt like the Warriors had pulled the trigger a little bit too soon. They signed him to that big extension. I think it's something along the lines of 28 million this year, and then it's going to be 30 plus million over the next couple. And that always felt a little, it felt premature. It felt like they were banking on this guy either continuing to produce at the level he was or improving consistently year over year. And you had really only seen this level of play from him for like 1.5 seasons at best. So they took a risk. They thought that they could lock up the future right then and there. That combined with the money that they gave to Andrew Wiggins, I felt like was a scenario where they thought that they were securing the future. They were getting their guys to step into those roles that Steph and Clay had right now, and you had the next generation sort of on the roster and ready to go. Obviously, with Jordan Poole, that didn't really work out. He kind of disappeared in the playoffs this past season. So the Warriors decide maybe we did jump the gun. Maybe we offered this guy too much money too soon for production that we weren't sure we were going to be able to maintain. So now they effectively get rid of him. And I mean, that's a calculated risk, right? It could turn out that Jordan Poole goes to Washington and he is that guy, right? He jumps right back up to 20 plus points per game and he's an absolute beast. But if you're the Warriors, um, you weren't sure he was going to be able to do it with you. Part of the same reason why they traded James Wiseman as well. They could take the time, keep him on the roster, see if he develops. But the Warriors are trying to win right now. Steph and Clay keep getting older. The window is starting to close. So they make moves to go for something a little bit more short term instead of waiting things out. So there's the explanation for that trade. There is one downside here for the Warriors, and it's that they really don't save a lot of money with this move. The luxury tax bill is really going to bite them in the ass here. And the contract values between Poole and Chris Paul are relatively similar. I think there's only like a $2 million difference between them for this season. So, you know, it's not exactly a salary dump. You take back pretty much the exact same amount um, that you were sending out. Of course, there is one little caveat there, and that's that Chris Paul's contract is not fully guaranteed for either this season or the next. So if this experiment doesn't work out, they could waive him, they could trade him again, anything in that nature, and maybe save a little bit of money there. So if you're the Warriors, relatively low risk. You get out of the Jordan Poole situation that they felt that they no longer wanted to be in, which honestly is hilarious because their new GM or president of basketball operations, I'm not sure which one, the new general manager, I did check it, Mike Dunleavy Jr., said something to the effect that they wanted Jordan Poole here for, at least another 4 years to play out his whole contract, and it turns out he doesn't stay there for more than like 4 days after that comment gets made. So, it's a little funny, but looking at it from Jordan Poole's perspective and the Wizards' perspective, they are acquiring further assets, right? There's a first round pick and a second round pick headed their way in this trade. The years of those picks are maybe a little bit further out than they had hoped for. The second rounder is 2027, the first rounder is 2030, but it's still assets for your team. And who knows, maybe 7 years from now, the Wizards are still bad, and that 2030 first round pick ends up being really good for them. Although it is protected, so it's a little bit of a strange issue, but it's a problem for the Wizards of the future, not the Wizards of right now. But more importantly than that, they get Jordan Poole, a guy who gets a second chance now, right? He really kind of effectively got run out of Golden State a little bit as his play dipped, especially in the playoffs. So this gives him an opportunity to play up to that contract, play for his own stats in a relatively low risk environment, because the Wizards very much are not going to be expecting to compete for postseason play anytime soon. So Poole has a chance to go somewhere where he can be the focal point of an offense and show us whether or not he can be the guy. And the numbers are still pretty damn good for him. This last season, he averaged 20.4 points, 2.7 rebounds, 4.5 assists per game. Obviously, all those numbers dipped dramatically once we got to the postseason, but in the regular season at least, he was still able to produce. He had a career high there, and that's the Jordan Poole that the Wizards are hoping that they're going to get. The talent still appears to be there. He just needs to remember how to play basketball correctly, apparently. So if you're the Wizards, you're hoping that that is the case. You're hoping that Jordan Poole gets to go to a lower stress environment where he can thrive and get back up to that point. And if that does happen, it gives the Wizards something that they desperately needed, right? They have young talent. Talked about it in originally the Bradley Beal trade video. They've got some young guys, right? Young-ish guys. They've got Daniel Gafford. They've got Corey Kispert. They've got Denny Avdia. They've got all these guys who are like in the 23 to 25 range, I believe. in terms of their ages. So they're young, they're developing, they're showing some promise, but none of those guys had really come forward as a clear-cut number one option on this team, mostly because last season especially they were playing around guys like Bradley Beal, guys like Kristaps Porzingis, guys like Kyle Kuzma, who were demanding a lot of the opportunities. So we didn't get to see if any of those guys could be the number one option. With Poole on the lineup, that is still kind of the case, but not to the same degree. Instead of you being role players and pieces fitted around this core trio, you're going to be guys around a potential number one scorer in Poole, but Avdia, Kispert, Gafford will have the opportunity to show us if they can be the number two option, if they can take that step up from role player or sixth man kind of scenario into a consistent option for the team outside of Poole, which is assuming Poole again plays up to his contract, but it gives them someone to focus around, to play around, right? Because having a bunch of young guys go out there and just do their own thing and establish their own hierarchy is incredibly dangerous for teams to do. Sometimes it works out, right? We've seen the Houston Rockets do something there where they basically just kind of let all of their young guys go and figured out who sort of ranked where in their offensive hierarchy, and it kind of sort of fit into place. I know that's hard to say for a team that won fewer than 20 games, but in terms of whose position was where, they were able to figure that out. But that rarely happens. A lot of the times you have a lot of guys going out there, opportunities aren't consistent, players' stats don't end up consistent, and you just kind of flounder for a little while. And that's the situation the Wizards are absolutely trying to avoid here. Having Jordan Poole as sort of that focal point potentially for the offense gives the rest of the young talent a little bit more structure to work around, and 9 times out of 10, that structure is better than just pure chaos. So if you're the Wizards, I like the way that they're going within the context that we knew this team was going to have to rebuild, right? Obviously, losing your top three scorers in Beal, Porzingis, and Kuzma is not fantastic, but you knew it was coming. So at least they're trying to stay in front of it. At least they're trying to acquire assets. They're trying to put themselves in a position where their young guys can get better and they can build for the future. So I feel like I've been saying that a lot, mostly because the Wizards have been involved in like 3 trades in a row now. But the point still stands. They're gonna suck for a little while, but they're getting better. They're building assets. That's the best you can expect. And then for the Warriors, Chris Paul gets a chance to chase his ring, and genuinely, this might be one of his better opportunities, right? The Warriors obviously didn't get past the Lakers in the second round last season, but I think there's still one or two more genuine threatening runs out of this team at least. And if Chris Paul is on board for one or more of them, it works out for both sides. So yeah, that is that. Warriors and Wizards pull off a trade. Chris Paul is headed to the Bay, and we'll see how that works out. And then we'll see what happens here in the draft, because I don't think that's the end of the deals that we're seeing here. There's probably going to be a little bit more movement in the draft tonight, but obviously that is tonight. But for now, we are done here. Chris Paul is officially a Warrior. If you saw that one coming, if you have that on your bingo card, congratulations. Because you can see more of the future than any of the rest of us can. But yeah, Warriors get their guy, the Wizards get some value, and we all walk away feeling like this trade is useful, if nothing else. So let me know what you think. If you think Chris Paul is going to be successful, what role you think he's going to play as well. Do you think he's going to be that guy off the bench? Do you think they somehow try to move people over, shift people down position-wise to get him into the starting lineup? And what do you think we're going to see from Jordan Poole this season as a Washington Wizard? Do you believe that he's going to bounce back, that he's going to average 20-plus points a game again, and really be that guy for them? But either way, let me know. Thank you for watching, and I will talk to you all later.